thereof. So my lord did take and read it, and after a little pause he said, The Babylonians have had against man's soul a great consultation to day. They have, I say, this day been contriving the utter ruin of the town, and the result of their counsel is, to set man's soul into such a way which, if taken, will surely make her destroy herself. And to this end they are making ready for their own departure out of the town, intending to betake themselves to the field again, and there to lie till they shall see whether this project will take or no. But be thou ready with the men of thy lord, for on the third day they will be in the plain, there to fall upon the Babylonians. For the prince will by that time be in the field, yea, by that it is break of day, sun rising, or before, and that with a mighty force against them. So he shall be before them, and thou shalt be behind them, and betwixt you both their army shall be destroyed. When Captain Credence heard this, away goes he to the rest of the captains, and tells them what a note he had a while since received from the hand of Emmanuel. And, said he, that which was dark therein hath my lord the Lord Secretary expounded unto me. He told them moreover what by himself and by them must be done to answer the mind of their lord. Then were the captains glad, and Captain Credence commanded that all the king's trumpeters should ascend to the battlements of the castle, and there, in the audience of Diabolus and of the whole town of Mansoul, make the best music that heart could invent. The trumpeters then did as they were commanded. They got themselves up to the top of the castle, and thus they began to sound. Then did Diabolus start, and said, What can be the meaning of this? They neither sound boot and saddle, nor horse and away, nor a charge. What do these madmen mean, that yet they should be so merry and glad? Then answered him one of themselves, and said, This is for joy that their prince Emmanuel is coming to relieve the town of Mansoul, that to this end he is at the head of an army, and that this relief is near. The men of Mansoul also were greatly concerned at this melodious charm of the trumpets. They said, Yea, they answered one another, saying, This can be no harm to us. Surely this can be no harm to us. Then said the Babylonians, What had we best to do? And it was answered, It was best to quit the town. And that, said one, ye may do in pursuance of your last counsel, and by so doing also be better able to give the enemy battle, should an army from without come upon us. So on the second day they withdrew themselves from Mansoul, and abode in the plains without, but they encamped themselves before Eye Gate, in what terrene and terrible manner they could. The reason why they would not abide in the town, besides the reasons that were debated in their last conclave, was, for that they were not possessed of the stronghold, and because, said they, we shall have more convenience to fight, and also to fly, if need be, when we are encamped in the open plains. Besides, the town would have been a pit for them rather than a place of defence, had the prince come up and enclosed them fast therein. Therefore they betook themselves to the field, that they might also be out of the reach of the slings, by which they were much annoyed all the while that they were in the town. Well, the time that the captains were to fall upon the Babylonians being come, they eagerly prepared themselves for action. But Captain Credence had told the captains overnight that they should meet their prince in the field to-morrow. This therefore made them yet far more desirous to be engaging the enemy, for you shall see the prince in the field to-morrow was like oil to a flaming fire, for of a long time they had been at a distance. They therefore were for this the more earnest and desirous of the work. So, as I said, the hour being come, Captain Credence, with the rest of the men of war, drew out their forces before it was day by the sallyport of the town. And being all ready, Captain Credence went up to the head of the army, and gave to the rest of the captains the word, and so they to their under officers and soldiers. The word was, the sword of the Prince Emmanuel, and the shield of Captain Credence, which is, in the Mansoulian tongue, the word of God and faith. Then the captains fell on and began roundly to front and flank and rear Diabolus' camp. Now they left Captain Credence in the town, because he was yet ill of his wounds, which the Babylonians had given him in the last fight. But when he perceived that the captains were at it, what does he but, calling for his crutches with haste, gets up, and away he goes to the battle, saying, Shall I lie here when my brethren are in the fight, and when Emmanuel the prince will show himself in the field to his servants? But when the enemy saw the man come with his crutches, they were daunted yet the more. For, thought they, what spirit has possessed these Mansolians, that they fight us upon their crutches? Well, the captains, as I said, fell on, and did bravely handle their weapons, still crying out and shouting as they laid on blows, the sword of the Prince Emmanuel, and the shield of Captain Credence. Now when Diabolus saw that the captains were come out, and that so valiantly they surrounded his men, he concluded that, for the present, nothing from them was to be looked for but blows and the dints of their two-edged sword. Wherefore he also falls on upon the prince's army with all his deadly force. So the battle was joined. Now who was it that at first Diabolus met with in the fight, but Captain Credence on the one hand, and the Lord Wilby-will on the other? Now Wilby-will's blows were like the blows of a giant, for that man had a strong arm, and he fell in upon the election doubters, for they were the life-guard of Diabolus, and he kept them in play a good while, cutting and battering shrewdly. Now when Captain Credence saw my lord engaged, he did stoutly fall on the other hand, upon the same company also, so they put them to great disorder. Now Captain Goodhope had engaged the vocation doubters, and they were sturdy men, but the captain was a valiant man. Captain Experience did also send him some aid. So he made the vocation doubters to retreat. The rest of the armies were hotly engaged, and that on every side, and the Diabolonians did fight stoutly. Then did my lord secretary command that the slings from the castle should be played, and his men could throw stones at an hair's breadth. But after a while, those that were made to fly before the captains of the prince did begin to rally again, and they came up stoutly upon the rear of the prince's army. Wherefore the prince's army began to faint. But, remembering that they should see the face of their prince by and by, they took courage, and a very fierce battle was fought. Then shouted the captain, saying, The sword of the Prince Emmanuel, and the shield of Captain Credence. And with that Diabolus gave back, thinking that more aid had been come. But no Emmanuel as yet appeared. Moreover, the battle did hang in doubt, and they made a little retreat on both sides. Now, in the name of respite, Captain Credence bravely encouraged his men to stand to it, and Diabolus did the like as well as he could. But Captain Credence made a brave speech to his soldiers, the contents whereof here follow. Gentlemen soldiers, and my brethren in this design, it rejoiceth me much to see in the field for our prince this day so stout and so valiant an army, and such faithful lovers of man's soul. You have hitherto, as hath become you, shown yourselves men of truth and courage against the Diabolonian forces, so that for all their boast they have not yet much cause to boast of their gettings. Now take to yourselves your wonted courage, and show yourselves men even this once only, for in a few minutes after the next engagement this time you shall see your prince show himself in the field, for we must make this second assault upon this tyrant Diabolus, and then Emmanuel comes. No sooner had the captain made this speech to his soldiers, but one Mr. Speedy came post to the captain from the prince, to tell him that Emmanuel was at hand. This news when the captain had received, he communicated to the other field officers, and they again to their soldiers and men of war. Wherefore, like men raised from the dead, so the captains and their men arose, made up to the army, and cried as before, The sword of the Prince Emmanuel, and the shield of Captain Credence. The Diabolonians also bestirred themselves, and made resistance as well as they could, but in this last engagement the Diabolonians lost their courage, and many of the doubters fell down dead to the ground. Now, when they had been in the heat of battle about an hour or more, Captain Credence lift up his eyes and saw, and behold, Emmanuel came, and he came with colours flying, trumpets sounding, and the feet of his men scarce touched the ground. They hasted with that celerity towards the captains that were engaged. Then did Credence wind with his men to the townward, and gave to Diabolus the field. So Emmanuel came upon him on the one side, and the enemy's place was betwixt them both. Then again they fell to it afresh, and now it was but a little while more but Emmanuel and Captain Credence met, still trampling down the slain as they came. But when the captain saw that the prince was come, and that he fell upon the Diabolonians on the other side, and that Captain Credence and